Okay guys, welcome back. This is probably the 20th time I've tried to do this video. So we're going to talk about my cherry shrimp tank today. I'm going to try and do just kind of a video log to update on each one of my shrimp breeding tanks every couple of weeks to let you know how things are going. But I wanted to be more specific in this video on how I set things up in this tank, because I realized in my previous videos I didn't really cover it very well as to what the setup was, what the equipment was that I was using, and that sort of thing. So we're just going to do that, and I'm going to sort of stay in one small area of this tank, but I do want to zoom it out a little bit. I'm going to back it up just so I can show you what this tank looks like now in comparison to where we were when you first saw the video. So if you saw the other video, you're going to realize that this is quite a bit different from where we were. Lots more plants, lots more floaters, all that sort of thing. I do apologize. I realize that my camera doesn't do a great job of focusing on the entirety of the tank and the fish as they swim by. But like I said, I am doing this with a cell phone, so this is as good as it's going to get. I also want you to note, I'm going to talk about the equipment first in this tank, and I'm just going to zoom in on a spot here a little bit so I can highlight it. I want to show you the filter I'm using. Put a flashlight on it so you can see it. So this is a Higer double sponge filter with a biofiltration compartment in the bottom of each sponge. You can see in that one there's bio balls in the bottom of it. So here's the reasoning behind that. I'm always used to using canister filters, and one of the pluses with a canister filter is the fact that you can change out your biomedia pretty simply. So if you need to add Purigen or charcoal or any of those sort of things, you can just toss it in there. It doesn't have to be in the tank. And you can filter out whatever it is you're looking to filter out, whether it's, diseases or medication or tannins or whatever it is you're trying to remove from your water. With a canister filter, it's a little simpler. But shrimp and canister filters they're not exactly, they don't go well together. Sponge filters are definitely the way to go. But I still wanted the ability to put in different types of filter media if I needed to. And that particular filter that Higer makes gave me that ability. So now that I showed you that filter, I'm going to go back in, because like I said before, I realized on my other videos that this setup is not really great for showing you or focusing in on any one particular thing. So we're gonna try and focus in here. I put some food in here a little earlier for the shrimp, but you can see now, because I've recorded this video so many times, most of it's gone and the shrimp are starting to leave. But we're gonna do the best we can with it, and I'll try and show you what's here, although there's not too many. So let's talk about the setup. So like I said, this tank was set up about the end of March. Higer double sponge filter with biomedia in the bottom. Those are just whatever bio balls came. Actually, no, I put Eheim bio balls in the bottom of that. I have a Nycrew light put up here that's running about 35% for 12 hours a day. Yes, that seems like a lot. And probably 10% blue light for an hour at night. Now, my reading has suggested that blue light only grows algae. Perfect. That's what I'm trying to do, algae and biofilm. I have ottos and shrimp and snails in here. Let's grow some algae for an hour at night. Sounds good to me. The tank itself is a 20-gallon long. Now, when it comes to the substrate, there's a little bit of explaining I need to do. This was done with fluval stratum. Yes, for those of you who know better and are going, oh my God, what did you do? You are right. I didn't know better. So this has about 1.5 inches or so of fluval stratum at the bottom. Maybe about 2.5 inches of black blasting sand on top. This tank was the new home for the cherry shrimp that I had in a 5-gallon tank on my desk that I felt like I wanted to take it sort of to the next step and do some larger breeding in a larger tank and see what kind of colony I could develop. And the 5-gallon was too small for that, so they were transferred here. This tank was up and running for 3-ish or so weeks before the transfer took place. It was a fish-in cycle with the Cory cats and the ottos that are in here. And yes, they had a specific reason as well, as did my mystery snail and the neorites that are in here. I'll talk about them a little bit later. So that's kind of the equipment. other than the air pump, which is a larger air pump that I got off of Amazon for, I think, 50 bucks. And it's running 3 of the tanks that are here now, and will eventually be running a 4th. For 50 bucks, that's cheaper than buying an individual air pump for each one of the tanks. That's why that was done. So, end of March, this tank was set up, ran for about 3 weeks. Tank appeared to have gone through a cycle. Things appeared to be reasonably stable. I was in a bit of a hurry to get the tank off of my desk. I had other things I needed to get done. So maybe this was rushed a little bit. That's why I ran into some problems. So the shrimp were put in here out of the 50-gallon. Now, most of them were very, 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 very young. A few weeks old, perhaps. And I think I transferred, let's call it 60 shrimp out of the 50-gallon in here. Figured we were safe at the time. Immediately started to run into problems. My pH started to crash, obviously as a result of the fluval stratum, and I started to have ammonia issues shortly after a pH crash. I'm relatively sure that these 2 problems cost me at least half of the colony that I put in here. I never saw dead shrimp, but they were so small, and it's such a large tank for shrimp with so many hiding spots, I'm not surprised that I didn't. But what I did see was a reduction in breeding, or actually a complete stop. And I saw far fewer of my shrimp out on a day-to-day basis than I did when I first got them in here. So let's talk about what happened. Fluval stratum is what they call an active substrate. I didn't realize this at the time. I had only heard and seen on other channels without paying real close attention, which I should have done, that, you know, oh, fluval stratum, and I know there's a couple of other ones that were talked about. I don't remember their names, I didn't use them, were great for shrimp. That's half true. They are great for Caradina shrimp, because Caradina shrimp like a lower pH. Neocaradina shrimp are much happier in harder water. So by putting the fluval stratum in here, it began to buffer the tank and drop the pH down pretty rapidly, even though I had already put a couple of teaspoons of crushed coral in the bottom of the biofilter, or the biomedia spots for the Hygger double sponge. It still overcame that and continued to drop. So I grabbed some dead coral that I had in another tank and tossed it in here. I filled up a bag of crushed coral and put it in behind the driftwood to try and raise the pH. What I probably should have done was left it the heck alone. The one thing that is repeated over and over and over to me now, and this comes from Richard, who keeps shrimp, the fellow who wrote the Neocaradina shrimp book, is shrimp like stability. I should have just left it alone without trying to drastically raise it back up to values that really don't matter. I mean, they matter. Don't get me wrong, they matter. But I think stability trumps pH level. So I struggled with pH and trying to bring it up and fighting the fluval stratum. And I also had an issue with an ammonia outbreak shortly after that whole thing started as well. And that was specific to the water lettuce. So each plant, each fish in here has a reason. The water lettuce was put in to fight the ammonia because it produces or reproduces so quickly. The roots grow these nice long tendril roots with these long spiky things that come off of it that all the shrimp love to graze off of. It was all about providing an area for biofilm to grow and for removing ammonia. What I didn't realize at the time is that water lettuce and sponge filters are not friends. Sponge filters create bubbles that pop, and then the water, when that bubble pops, lands on the leaves of the water lettuce. Water lettuce is not happy when it's wet, and the leaves rot and die, and eventually the whole plant dies. And if you don't have an established amount of them in your tank and you start to lose them rapidly, it starts to affect the ammonia levels in your tank because you were relying on that to pull the ammonia out. So that was where my problems began with ammonia. All in all, I think I probably lost a little over half of the colony that I put in here. And I didn't really get the tank straightened out until sometime in June, maybe, where it was stable and I wasn't having any issues of any kind, and everything seems to have stabilized. So there's really only been 2 months, July, August, where these shrimp have had kind of a stable area, and that probably reflects the amount of shrimp that are in this tank. My suggestion is at this point, and I know what you see on the ground doesn't represent it, and that's because really when I put food in this tank for my shrimp, the shrimp aren't that impressed by it. They'd much rather be up on the floaters or on the sponge eating the biofilm. So the tiny little bit of shrimp that you see here right now are really not representative of how many are in the tank. At least not entirely. So that covers some of the problems I had with this tank in the beginning. Most of that would have been solved by just being more patient and letting the tank establish for a longer period of time. Now, the plants in here also had some issues with, and that was, again, my own doing because of lighting levels. So, like I said, everything in this tank has a purpose, even the plants. So the Coriambosa was planted in here, and maybe what I'll do, I'll just move out from this position here for a second. So the Coriambosa are these plants with these big, bright green leaves that you see all over the tank, right? And you can see the floater the floater roots that are coming down from the tank. Again, this is all done in an effort to provide more square footage for biofilm to grow on. So they were all planted specifically for the purposes of breeding shrimp in this tank. Now, the Coriambosa grows pretty fast, gives a lot of new area for biofilm to grow on. The S. repens was intended to do the same. It was meant to be a bushy ground cover. You can clearly see from the shots that I've shown previously that it's dying back, not moving forward so much. So the issues I had were with plant growth and I think ammonia as well at the beginning. And the reason my S. repens didn't take off was due to light. I had some algae issues early on in this tank. And of course, as you know, if you're trying to deal with algae issues, one of the things that you do is you reduce light levels, which I did. I dropped the light levels down pretty dramatically in this tank and then forgot about it and let the floaters grow in, and they covered more square surface of the tank and really started to cancel out the amount of light coming down to my carpeting plants like the S. repens. They began to turn yellow and die off. This all happened in about the last month or so. Took that long for me to really figure out, hey, why are these S. repens not taking hold? I kind of thought maybe my mystery snail was responsible for eating them. Turns out that's absolutely not the case. The only plants I ever see him eat are plants that are already having some kind of a deficiency. Your snails will definitely go after that. Once I got the lighting levels sorted out, we started to see some more growth on the S. repens, although I fully expect that to die back, and I'm going to have to replace it with something that appreciates lower levels of light, more so than the S. repens does. So moving on from the plants and the floaters that were put in here specifically for the shrimp, like the water lettuce, like the Coriambosa, those sort of things, the subwater tang. The other thing that I've done that a lot of shrimp keepers don't do is I've strayed away from bare bottom. Clearly I've put in sort of escaped tank, at least a planted tank, fluval stratum as a substrate. I've got sand on top. And you're going to see here in these shots that I've got cories. There's actually 3 cory cats in here. And they're all specific to a purpose, and they do not bother the shrimp. I have never, ever, ever seen my cories eat a shrimp on purpose or by accident, even the smallest ones. In fact, the shrimp that are in here with my cories, they all seem to get along with the cories. They kind of ignore them for the most part. You'll see only the youngest ones ever take off when a cory approaches. The cory cats couldn't care less. I often come down here and find a shrimp sitting on top of one of my cory cats' heads. I don't know what they're doing, but they just don't care. The reason for the cory cats over any other cory that I could have put in here is because cory cats have limited vision. Here's why that's a plus. Cory cats are some of the only cories I see that actively and always shuffle their nose through the sand. Now, I know you'll see other cories, they're bottom feeders, and they kind of pick off of the sand and they pick off of the leaves and they float around. But if you really, really watch them, I find that only cory cats are really, really actively pushing your substrate around. Other cories tend to just eat off of the surface, but cories seem to actively shuffle it around. And that gives an opportunity for any of the mulm and detritus to get underneath of that sand and into an area where the bacteria and the plants can take that up as nutrients. So that was reason one for the cories. Reason two, as you watch them, you'll see that when they're pecking at the ground, they also have a very strong sort of tail action that kicks up a lot of the detritus and mulm that's in the bottom of the tank. So anything that they're coming across, if they're not actively shuffling it underneath of the sand, they're kicking it into the water column where the filter can then try and pick it up. So they're kind of a dual purpose. And they are very good at keeping the tank detritus and mulm free, certainly in this one anyways. Now, yeah, there's little areas that if you really look closely, you might find a little bit of it, and that's why I use the black sand. It's a lot less noticeable. I'm still trying to get accustomed to allowing mulm and detritus on the tank surface and just let it be part of the natural escape of the aquarium, because I realize in a lot of cases that mulm and detritus is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. However, it's still a challenge for me. So that's why I use the black sand, because it limits how much of that you can see, and it stops you from having that impulse where you want to get in there and start mucking about with everything. And the most important thing in a shrimp tank, and Richard says this all the time from the Neocaradina handbook, is to allow or to just don't mess with your shrimp tank. Don't keep sticking your hand in there. Don't keep changing things. Allow it to just exist without interruption. Your shrimp want stability over anything else, and I cannot stress that enough. This tank, the pH, I never did win the battle. Like I said, the pH in here is probably somewhere between 6 and 7, mid 6 range, maybe even lower than that. The shrimp are fine. They're happy now. They're breeding, and that's entirely because I've kept my hands out of the tank. I've stopped trying to fight the pH level, and I'm just leaving it be. And they're so much happier now, and there's so much more breeding going on. So that was a purpose for my cory cats. The autos are pretty self-explanatory. They're great for keeping the glass clean. Also, the coriambosa has a tendency to grow this weird sort of fuzzy algae around the edges of the leaves. Autos are great for getting rid of that. Obviously, there are botanicals in here. I've got catappa leaves that degrade to feed the shrimp, to put tannins in the water. Tannins are so good for your fish and your shrimp at keeping parasites and bacteria and that sort of thing at bay. Just sort of like picture it almost like a natural medicine that's always circulating around your tank. It might be an over-exaggeration, but tannins do have a tendency to keep that sort of thing down. And then, of course, the snails. So there are 2 neorite snails in here. I rarely ever see them. They're usually hard at work on the algae that's on the glass. I only ever scrape the front of the glass, and I haven't scraped this for probably a month now, at least in the front. So the neorite snails and the autos do great at keeping the glass clean. The mystery snail in here is specifically in here to take care of any dead organic matter. So leaves that are dying, plants that are malnourished, food that isn't getting eaten, that sort of thing. And he's a super great little worker at doing that. And he does not, and I can't say this enough, snails of any kind, to my experience thus far, do not eat your plants. Now, I know if you look at my tanks, you'll see little round areas eaten out of plants, but if you have a good look at the plant, that's because the plant, that leaf was already dying or diseased or mineral deficient in some way. And yes, the snails will eat that. And to be perfectly honest, I don't have a problem with that, because that tells me I'm not doing something right for fertilization in the tank. And in some cases, like the S. repens, I've decided that because of the nature of this tank, they're just not going to grow in here without drastic changes, and it's not something I want to do. So I'm going to let the snail have at it and eat what he can of it, and I will start to change up the ground cover as time goes on. But like I said, everything in this tank has a specific thought-out purpose and why it was done that way. Right or wrong, There were specific reasons for why I did things the way I did them, right from the cory cats to the type of plants to the type of filter that was in here. It has been a challenge over the last few months to find a stability with this tank. It was not as easy as I hoped it would be, although I've made corrections and the next few tanks that I have were significantly easier. I will continue to update you on this tank as time moves forward, but I kind of wanted to give my first video as a rounded view of the tank, the equipment that was used, the difficulties I had in setting it up and why, and the solutions I found, if I found them. But I hope that explains the process to you a little bit better. I hope you'll continue to follow me as I breed through this line and improve it. I'll do an update every so often, maybe every month or so, to let you know how things are going in this tank. I'll come back here if I'm experiencing any problems or super successes that I might enjoy, and we'll talk about them and maybe give some reasons why or why not things are working or not working, that sort of thing. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I hope you found any part of this video helpful in your own journey in keeping shrimp and fish and the fish keeping hobby. Take care. Until next time.